My name is Edmund Voss. I am 64 years old. When my son didn't show up to walk me through the front door of his restaurant's grand opening, I found my own way in through the kitchen. That's when I heard him tell his business partner, "If my old man shows up, tell him the event is private. He'll just embarrass us in front of the investors." I stood there in my paint-stained work jacket, holding a card I'd spent 2 days writing. What my son didn't know is that I own the building his restaurant sits in. I own the 4 buildings on that block. 30 minutes later, I made one phone call. His grand opening turned into the worst night of his life. But that was only the beginning. I want you to know something before I tell you the rest of this. I am not a man who cries easily. I built a life with my hands, literally. 38 years ago, I was hanging drywall in Charlotte, North Carolina, making $11 an hour, driving a truck with a cracked windshield I kept fixing with clear tape because I couldn't afford the replacement. My wife, June, she packed my lunch every morning in a brown paper bag. Turkey on white bread, an apple, and a handwritten note. Every single day without fail for 22 years until she got sick. June was the only one who knew what we had built. When people looked at me, they saw the truck, the jacket, the calluses on my hands. They didn't see the ledger book she kept in the bottom drawer of her nightstand. They didn't see the portfolio that had been quietly growing since 1989. They didn't see Edmund Voss the man. They saw a contractor. A blue-collar guy, somebody's father. My son's name is Trevor. He's 34. He has his mother's eyes, and it turns out, none of her character. I raised him in a modest house in South Charlotte, nothing flashy. I drove used cars, I bought clothes from Costco. I put money away every month like it was a religion, because June said to me once, early on before the boys were born, "Ed, if something ever happens to me, I need to know they won't be lost." So I made sure of it. I made sure of everything. I paid Trevor's way through culinary school at Johnson & Wales. I co-signed his first apartment lease. When he came to me 3 years ago with a business plan for a farm-to-table restaurant in Noda, the Arts District, I didn't just believe in him. I bought the building he wanted to put it in. I bought it in the name of Voss Property Holdings, LLC. I signed the lease myself, gave him a sweetheart rate, and told my attorney to draw up the papers quietly. I told Trevor I had a friend who owned the building, a guy I knew from the trades. I told him I'd called in a favor. He said, "Thanks, Dad," and went right back to talking to his girlfriend about the color scheme for the dining room. Her name is Amber. She is the kind of woman who orders a $16 oat milk latte and complains it isn't hot enough. She started dating Trevor about 2 years ago, and within 6 months his whole personality changed. He started wearing linen shirts. He stopped coming to Sunday dinners. He started calling me Edmund instead of Dad when she was around, which I think was supposed to signal something to her friends, that he came from somewhere better than he did. I let it go. June used to say, "Pick your battles, Ed," so I did. I swallowed it. I kept showing up to family dinners when I was invited, which got less and less frequent. I kept calling. I kept being the old man in the paint-stained jacket who drove a 10-year-old F-150 to his son's fancy events and stood in the corner, trying not to embarrass anyone. The grand opening of his restaurant, a place he called Linden and Oak, was on a Friday night in October. I'd been counting the days. I bought a new shirt, nothing expensive, just a clean blue button-down from JCPenney. I shined my boots. I wanted to make him proud. I wanted to stand in that dining room my son had built and feel what June would have felt. I got there a little early. The parking lot was already full of expensive cars. I came in through the back because the front entrance had a line of people with name tags and wine glasses, and I didn't see my son anywhere to walk in with. The kitchen door was propped open. I could smell garlic and rosemary. I stepped in. Trevor was standing near the pass-through with a man I didn't recognize, a younger guy in a blazer with a pocket square. They were talking quietly, urgently. I was about to call out when I heard my son's voice shift into the particular tone he uses when he's performing for someone. "If my old man actually shows up," he said, not whispering exactly, just low, "tell the hostess the event is private. Investors only. He'll come in here looking like he just left a job site and start talking to people about property taxes or whatever, and He laughed, a small, dismissive sound. "I can't have that tonight. Not in front of these people." The man in the blazer nodded like this was a perfectly reasonable thing to say. I didn't move. I stood there in the kitchen doorway with my clean blue shirt and my shined boots and a card in my inside pocket that started with the words, "Your mother would be so proud of you tonight, son." I had written it twice. The first draft I threw away because I cried on it. I felt something shift in my chest. Not break, shift, like a door closing that you know is never going to open the same way again. I turned around and walked back to my truck. I sat behind the wheel for a few minutes. I looked at my hands. I called my attorney, a man named Crawford, who has worked with me for 19 years. I said, "Crawford, you remember the Linden property on Commonwealth?" He said, "Yes." I said, "Pull the lease file. I'll be in your office Monday morning. There are some things I need to look at." Then I drove home and I had a bowl of soup and I watched the news and I went to bed. I want to be honest with you about something. The revenge part, the part you're waiting for, it didn't come from anger. I was past anger by the time I got home that night. What I felt was more like the quiet after a long job finally finishes, a stillness, a knowing that certain work is now behind you and different work lies ahead. Monday morning, Crawford laid the lease documents on the conference table. Trevor's monthly rent was $2,200. The building, which I had purchased in 2021 for $1.4 million, was now worth considerably more. The commercial corridor in Noda had exploded. I had 3 appraisals done quietly over the previous year. The building's current market value was $2.9 million. But that wasn't the most important number on the table. What does the lease say about the personal conduct clause? I asked. Crawford pointed to Section 11B. Tenant agrees to conduct all business in the leased premises in a manner consistent with the professional and community standards of the lessor. Any deliberate misrepresentation of the lease arrangement, including but not limited to misrepresentation of ownership, constitutes grounds for lease review. Trevor had been telling people, investors, food bloggers, the local press, that he had secured an independent, long-term lease through a private equity contact. He had used that framing in 2 interviews I'd found online. He had never mentioned his father. He had never mentioned that the rate he was paying was roughly 40% below market. He had built his brand story, his whole narrative as a self-made restaurateur, on a foundation I had poured. I told Crawford to draft a letter, not an eviction notice. Not yet. Just a letter from Voss Property Holdings LLC to Linden and Oak LLC, announcing a lease audit and a scheduled rent review meeting. The letter arrived at his restaurant on a Wednesday. Trevor called me that Thursday evening. His voice was careful, the way it gets when he's trying to manage something. Dad, I got this weird letter from the company that owns my building. A pause. Do you know anything about a Voss Properties? I was sitting in my kitchen eating leftover chili. What kind of letter? I said. A lease audit. They're saying my rent might be going up. They want a meeting. His voice tightened slightly. It's probably just some developer trying to squeeze me. I might need some help, Dad, like financially. These guys could be predatory, you know? It's a lot. How much are you paying right now? I asked. $2,200 a month, he said, but the market rate is closer to $4,000 or $5,000. If they jack it up, I could be looking at a serious shortfall in year 1. I said. That does sound stressful. He waited. I think he was waiting for me to offer money. I told him I'd look into it and hung up. The meeting was set for the following Tuesday at Crawford's office downtown. I told Crawford I would be attending as the principal of Voss Property Holdings. I told him to use my name on all the documents. Trevor arrived with Amber and a man I assumed was his new business partner, a guy named Blake with a firm handshake and a very expensive watch. They came in ready to negotiate. Trevor was wearing the linen shirt. He had a folder of financial projections and a letter from a commercial real estate attorney he'd hired over the weekend. Crawford led them to the conference room. I was already seated at the head of the table. My son stopped walking when he saw me. He stood in the doorway for a moment. His mouth did something I'd never seen it do before. It just went blank. No smile, no frown, just blank. Dad, the word came out like a question, like he wasn't sure it was accurate. Sit down, son, I said. He sat. They all sat. Amber was looking between Trevor and me with an expression I couldn't read. Blake was looking at his watch. Crawford cleared his throat and set a document in the center of the table. For the record, he said, Mr. Edmund Voss is the sole principal of Voss Property Holdings LLC, the legal owner of the property at 2847 Commonwealth Avenue, which is the current address of Linden and Oak LLC. He slid a copy of the deed across the table. Mr. Voss has been the owner of that property since March of 2021. Trevor didn't pick up the document. He just stared at it. The building, he said. His voice was very quiet. You own the building. I do. You told me you had a friend. I told you I knew someone who could help, I said. I didn't lie to you, Trevor. I helped you. I just didn't tell you exactly how. Amber grabbed Trevor's arm. Blake leaned back in his chair and looked at the ceiling. So what is this? Trevor said. What does this mean? Are you raising my rent? Are you? He stopped. His eyes moved across the documents on the table. He was calculating something. I watched him do it. How long have you known? About the opening. About what I said in the kitchen. Since the moment you said it, I told him. The silence after that was the kind that has weight to it. You can feel it pressing on your shoulders. Crawford spoke again. Mr. Voss has asked me to present 2 options. He set 2 separate folders on the table. Option 1, the lease is renegotiated at current market rate, approximately $4,800 per month, with a 12-month security deposit, effective 90 days from today. Option 2, that'll kill us, Blake said. It was the first thing he'd since sitting down. We're not cash flow positive yet. If rent doubles in 90 days, we're done. Crawford nodded calmly, which is why option 2 exists. He opened the second folder. Mr. Voss is willing to maintain the current rent structure under one condition. He slid a single page across the table. It was not a legal document. It was a letter. I had written it myself longhand the night before at June's old writing desk in the spare room. Trevor picked it up. I watched him read it. I will not tell you everything it said, but I will tell you that it started with the night his mother was in the hospital. 3 weeks before she died, and she made me promise that I would not let the distance between me and my boys grow so wide that it couldn't be crossed. I told him that I had spent 3 years trying to find my way back into his life and had been handed a kitchen doorway instead. I told him that I did not need an apology. I needed my son back. And that a father who has buried his wife and watched his son turn into a stranger is not a man who has infinite patience left. I told him that the building would be his one day, free and clear, because that was always the plan. But right now, today, what I needed from him was simple. I needed him to tell me the truth about who he had become and whether there was anything left of the boy his mother raised. Trevor put the letter down. He looked at the table for a long time. Amber started to say something, and he held up his hand and she stopped. He looked up at me, his eyes were wet. "I'm ashamed," he said. "It came out flat and simple, not performed. Not of you. I'm ashamed of what I turned into. I've been," he stopped, pressed his mouth together. "I've been pretending. To her friends, to investors, to everybody. I've been pretending I built this myself because I was ashamed to say my dad helped me. Not because I was ashamed of you." He exhaled slowly. "Because I was ashamed that I needed you." Amber reached for his hand. This time she didn't say anything. Blake quietly picked up his phone and stepped out of the room. I didn't say anything for a moment. I have made a lot of decisions sitting across tables in my life. You learn when to speak and when to let the air stay still. "What's the special today?" I said finally. Trevor blinked. "What?" "At the restaurant." "What's the special today?" He looked at me like I'd lost my mind. Then something in his face gave way and he almost laughed. "Braised short rib, roasted sweet potato, chimichurri. That sounds like something your mother would have liked," I said. He nodded. He couldn't talk right then. Crawford quietly gathered the folders. The meeting was over. We had dinner at Linden and Oak that night. Not a private event, not an investor reception. Just the two of us, and Amber at a table by the window with bread and butter and short rib and a candle that kept flickering in the draft from the front door every time someone new came in. Trevor told me things that night I think he'd been carrying for years. About the pressure he felt to be successful. About the way he'd convinced himself that being seen with me, the old contractor in the work jacket, undermined the image he was trying to build. He said it out loud, and it sounded as bad out loud as I imagine it looked in his chest all that time. I let him say all of it. I didn't interrupt. I didn't tell him it was fine, because it wasn't entirely fine, and he knew that, and pretending otherwise would have been an insult to both of us. When he was done, I reached into my inside pocket and pulled out the card. The second draft, the one I hadn't cried on, I put it on the table and slid it across to him. He looked at the envelope and then at me. "I thought you would have thrown this away," he said. "I almost did," I said. He opened it. He read it. The table next to us had a baby that kept laughing at something, a high, bright, ridiculous sound. I was grateful for it. He folded the card and put it in his own pocket. The lease stayed at $2,200 a month. I did not raise it that day, or in the months that followed. What I raised was my expectations. I told Trevor I wanted to be introduced accurately to anyone who asked how the restaurant came to be in that building. Not to take credit, not to embarrass him, just to stop being the secret he was hiding. He agreed to that. It took him a few tries to get comfortable with it, but he got there. Amber, to her credit, was better than I expected once the pretense was gone. She came to the house one Sunday and helped me clean out some of June's things I'd been putting off. She didn't make it a project. She just showed up and worked beside me quietly. That meant something. Blake left the partnership 6 months later over a disagreement about the direction of the menu. That turned out to be for the best. What I didn't tell Trevor, not for a long time, is that Crawford had already been preparing a different document the week before that Tuesday meeting. A document that transferred ownership of the building at 2847 Commonwealth Avenue to a trust in Trevor's name, to vest on his 40th birthday or upon my death, whichever came first. I signed it 2 days after our dinner. I filed it and told Crawford to hold it. It's sitting in his safe right now. My son doesn't know about it yet, he will. But I want him to earn the building first, the way his mother and I earned her everything we ever had, one day at a time. One honest conversation at a time. That's what June would have wanted. Not just for him to have it, for him to deserve it. I think about that kitchen doorway sometimes, the propped open door, the garlic and rosemary smell, that small, dismissive laugh my son made when he talked about me to a man in a blazer. I think about how I almost let that be the last memory I made in that place. Almost turned around for good and let the distance between us become permanent. I didn't. I went to Crawford's office instead. I wrote a letter at June's old desk. I showed up to the meeting in my regular clothes, no costume, no performance, just me. Sometimes the only way to teach someone your worth is to let them stand in the room where the deed is sitting on the table and watch them understand, all at once, what they almost threw away. Before you go, I want to ask you something. Was what I did too harsh? Should I have just told him the truth from the beginning and saved us both 2 years of distance? Or do you think a son has to earn the right to know what his father built? Let me know in the comments. And if you've ever felt invisible to the people you gave the most to, tell me about it. Because I don't think I'm the only one.